What's on YouTube? Welcome back for another video. Haven't done a basketball time machine video in a while. My boy Sean David that hosts his channel. Haven't done one of his videos in a while. He got a new video up today, and I just came across it. NBA old school versus new school, the best era. Which era is gonna be the best? The old school or new school? New school got a lot of flash, a lot of real athletic players, a lot of scoring and stuff. But old school, they got down to the nitty gritty. How about the sneeze just there? But nitty gritty. Oh, I can't believe I said that. That's kind of cringy. Anyway, let's get right to the video, man. I'm doing so much talking, man.
Hey folks, how's it going? Welcome back to the Basketball Time Machine. I'm your host, Sean David. Thanks for tuning in. Let's talk some old school NBA basketball. In today's episode, I want to take a look at the best decades, or let's say the best eras in NBA basketball. So compare old school with new school and see which decade actually was the greatest. But before we dive into today's episode, let's take a look at my sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Magic Spoon Grain-Free Cereal. Since I am a kid of the 1980s, I grew up with my weekly dose of Saturday morning cartoons, and naturally, my cereals. But getting older and having to watch my...
So I can't watch that.
So how am I going to approach this list?
Not trying to be rude from not watching this sponsor or whatever like that. I just like to get right to the action, man.
Well, I narrowed it down to 5 different eras, so let's start with number 5.
5 different eras?
Coming in at number 5 are the 2010s. As an old school NBA fan, this is the era where the game truly changed a great deal. The NBA became more of an offensively minded league, just like in the 1970s, but without the physical aspect. There's no denying that this decade had many great players like Dirk Nowitzki, LeBron James, D. Wade, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, etc. But the game itself moved away from the fundamentals and focused way more on athleticism. Yeah. Some of the biggest superstars are naturally great players and could have played in any era, but also I would like to say that they never were tested in the way that some of the other legends got tested. But more on that later when we talk about other decades. The 2010s are the rise of the three-pointers, and gone are the days of the dominant big men. But from this point onwards, guards would dominate the league. Also, one reason why I can't rank this decade higher is that there were hardly any skilled big men, no variety, and every team...
I'm sorry, I'm trying to listen to him, but I'm watching the highlights at the same time. DeAndre Jordan
played the same way. There's no denying that the guys could jump out of the building and shoot from literally everywhere, but when it comes to the all-around game, this decade was the start of the boredom.
Just because Dirk is 7 feet tall and he's a great shooter, just because Kevin Durant is 7 foot and he's a great shooter, that don't mean all you other 7-foot dummies should be out there shooting jumpers.
And the next decade that I have on my list coming in at number 4 is the 1970s. The era of Dr. J, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, George Gervin, aka the Iceman, and many other legends. When we talk about the 1970s, we have to remember that this was a very wild era. Many players were using drugs and not every team was good. But what was outstanding to me was that this decade seemed to have a hell...
He telling the truth though. A lot of players back then was on drugs and stuff, man. That's why a lot of them didn't have a long career. That's kind of sad though, but at the same time, you know, they shouldn't have been doing drugs, but that's what they did back in the day, man. You know,
healthy balance of fundamentals and athleticism. If I hear some people talk about that guys could not jump back in the days, they should really take a look at the early footage of David Thompson and Dr. J. And no, I don't want to say that the 1970s were the best era in NBA basketball, but this would be a springboard of what was about to come. And some of its superstars laid the groundwork of what would later be the perfect NBA.
You know, when you talk about Oscar Robertson, I was on a panel with Oscar Robertson and Jerry West. And to see Jerry West talk about Oscar Robertson, he like, I know I'm the logo and everything else. He said, but in my era, there was no better basketball player than Oscar Robertson.
Amen.
And next on my list, so coming in at number 3 are the 2000s.
Man,
What a great
2000s
era.
is
But I
crazy.
have to be honest, back in the days, I already realized that this was a different style of basketball than I was used to.
My
in
boy
the past.
AI.
But it was still very much enjoyable basketball.
Excuse me.
We had Shaquille O'Neal, we had Kobe Bryant, we had Allen Iverson, Kevin Garnett, and all in all, those players were great. These players easily could have been the face of the league if there weren't just so many of them. This to me was the golden age of power forwards with Duncan, Webber, Nowitzki, Garnett, Wallace, and so on. And
Man,
again, a
those
totally
were great
different style
players.
of play. A major difference was the style the point guards played. Slowly but surely, point guards morphed into scorers instead of being pass-first guards. Still, the dynamic of the game was healthy. Guys were still playing defense, though not as tough and
Get
brutal
up.
as in my 2 favorite eras. Also, we still had some small rivalries which were important for us fans. However, one reason why I can't rank this decade higher was that the big men started to vanish. Shaquille O'Neal and Yao Ming seemed to be the last dominant big, while
Yeah.
Olajuwon, Ewing, and David Robinson retired.
Giving me a 5 from the 2000s.
Big fella.
I guess you would, big fella.
Number 5, I'll put Dr. O'Neal.
Dr. O'Neal.
2, gotta go with the Copester.
Okay.
At the 3, who was at the 3? Give me some names.
LeBron. T-Mac.
Yeah, LeBron.
Melo.
Yeah, LeBron at the 3.
Hope
At the
you-
4, you gotta go with Mr. Duncan. And the point's gonna be hard. Nash beat me out twice for MVP. I still don't know how.
Who's the point guard?
I'm gonna go with AI.
And coming in at number 2
Your top
are the
5.
1990s. Guys, here I have to be objective. The 1990s to me was the most fun time to be an NBA fan ever. I mean, the Bulls itself are reason enough.
shit.
Prime Jordan, then of course guys like Karl Malone and John Stockton, Sean Kemp, Gary Payton, Olajuwon, and a young Shaq. I mean, you name it. It was great to be alive at that time and to see some of the most beautiful basketball plays ever. The 1990s had the perfect balance. Every team had an NBA superstar, and it was a great mixture between fundamentals, skills, and physicality. What I also loved was that each conference stood for a specific style of play. The East was more physical and a little bit slower, while the Western Conference was more of a run and gun basketball. I would put any 1990s legend in today's NBA, and I bet you they would be even better today. I mean, remember
Yeah,
back in those
they
days
were
there was
tough.
still handshaking. It was really tough for guys to score a basket. And yes, maybe guys today can shoot a little bit better, but I also would like to see how they would shoot while they're getting their asses knocked on the floor. Talent-wise, there was only one decade that was even better than the 1990s.
And be careful how you answer that number 5 spot.
I mean, that's a no-brainer who my center
okay,
is.
all
It's a
right.
no-brainer.
Just checking.
Power
Just
forward,
checking.
These hands on you.
Karl Malone. Two-guard MJ.
Okay.
And my point guard, I'm going with John Stockton.
Oh, Lord.
No, I'm good. Okay. I was all right.
It was just my power forward.
Stockton, Jordan, Malone, and Shaq.
And then my small forward, with Dominique Wilkins, just to give him some love.
So we finally made it to the number 1 spot, and the number 1 era, in my
80s.
opinion, objectively speaking, has to be the 1980s. This decade had so many legends, it's impossible to name them all. But just to name a few: Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Isaiah Thomas, Dr. J, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Moses Malone, Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing, and the list goes on and on and
my
on.
God,
Some of
that's a
those
lot of
teams in
legends.
that era were considered to be the greatest teams ever. And just like in the 1990s, guys played physical defense but also been talented on offense. This decade to me has to be the most talented in NBA history.
Now, I think the toughest era, you know, just looking at it, you know, is the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at, you know, the two teams that, you know, we argue and say are the 2 best ever, you know, Boston's 86
The
team
Lakers.
is, you know, arguably the best team to ever play, you know, in the NBA. And then that Laker 87 team, you know, some people have that in the top, you know, 3 to 4. You know, so I think in that era with Dr. J, Kareem, Magic, Bird, you know, some of the 50 greatest players, you know, a lot of them are in that era.
I would agree. Men played in the 80s. Like, it was, you know, you're 28, 29, you were hitting your career, figuring it out. You know, we're here, you're 21, 22, different type of player. This is the most fun era to watch
What's the best?
and easiest. Oh, the 80s. 80s is
80s is the best.
To
Toughest
me.
and best.
Toughest and best. easiest and most fun to watch is now.
When I came into the league, there were so many guys who were so good at what they did, and guys that you wouldn't even think of, you hardly even heard of, but you see a guy like a Ricky Pierce or a Vinnie Johnson, and those guys, unbelievable shooters. I mean, hit a mid-range shot with you in their face. You know, you play against an Alex English, and he looks like he's moving in slow motion, but he's scoring nonstop. Where do these guys come from? Yeah, exactly. You think, where do these guys come from? There's so many guys who are so good at their job. That was the thing in the NBA. Coming from college, there's no way you can be prepared for that.
All right, you guys, that was it for today's.
There you have it. The 80s is more likely the best era ever. Mainly because they were tough. You know, they played basketball the right way. But the most entertaining, probably the funnest era to watch is probably 2010s or 2000. Probably 2010. There was a lot of scorers, a lot of very, very athletic players back then. Just like now, we got a lot of very athletic players now, but we don't have a lot of tough players like back in the 80s, no. They're not tough like they used to be, man. It's crazy how the NBA got so soft. They got so soft. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think about the video. Shout out to Sean David and the Basketball Time Machine. And Boy K Smooth, I'm out. Peace.